The morning air over London is crisp, cold, and heavy with the weight of a decision that will likely be recorded as the final nail in the coffin of the House of Sussex. Inside the private offices of Kensington Palace, Prince William, now acting as the de facto sovereign under the delegation of duties established at the start of the year, sat behind his desk. He was not reviewing state papers or diplomatic cables. He was reviewing a desperate 11-page financial appeal from his brother, Prince Harry. The document was a plea for survival, a request for a staggering sum of money to prevent the immediate foreclosure of the Montecito estate that had become the symbol of Harry's independence. William read the document once, placed it on the mahogany surface, and delivered a verdict that was relayed verbally through his private secretary. His words were precise, unyielding, and devoid of brotherly sentiment. He stated simply that the request was denied because the Duchy of Cornwall is not a safety net for bad decisions. It was not just a rejection, it was a reckoning. At precisely 9:15 a.m., palace officials confirmed internally that the matter was closed. There would be no wire transfer, no bridge loan, and no quiet intervention to save Harry from the consequences of his own financial mismanagement. To understand how the king's son ended up begging for a bailout, we must rewind 48 hours to the event that triggered this catastrophic collapse. A courier arrived at the gates of the $14 million Riven Rock estate in Montecito. He carried a termination letter from the Sussex's homeowners insurance provider. The letter was blunt. It stated that their coverage had been canceled effective immediately due to non-compliance updates amid heightened wildfire risk across Santa Barbara County. In the high-stakes world of California luxury real estate, insurance is the linchpin of ownership. Without insurance, the mortgage contract is breached instantly. J.P. Morgan Chase, the lender holding the $9.5 million mortgage on the property, wasted no time. They invoked a default clause buried deep within the contract, a clause that allowed them to initiate foreclosure proceedings based solely on the lapsed insurance coverage, regardless of payment history. The bank offered only one escape route, a force-placed emergency policy with an upfront premium of $400,000, payable within 48 hours. Harry checked his accounts. He checked the reserves, and he realized with dawning horror that he did not have the cash. Instead of contacting his attorneys or financial advisors to restructure his debt, Prince Harry did what he has always done when the walls close in. He looked to the palace. He placed a direct call to Kensington Palace, reportedly bypassing all standard royal protocol and insisting on an urgent review by William himself. The request he submitted was not modest. It was not a small loan to tide him over. According to senior insiders at the Duchy of Cornwall, Harry asked for a total package of $36.3 million. He requested $400,000 for the immediate insurance reinstatement. He asked for $1.2 million to cover looming legal, tax, and tuition obligations through March. He requested $7 million to protect against liability exposure related to his failing Netflix contracts. And, most ambitiously, he asked for $30 million to set up a long-term asset shielding structure via a blind trust to protect him from future insolvency. Prince William reviewed this request in under 20 minutes. He turned to Sir Alaric Worthington, the monarchy's longest-serving financial integrity officer and the current senior auditor of the duchy, and gave his instruction. He declared that no funds shall be released, the matter is closed, and the crown cannot be party to reputational or financial salvage. According to palace sources, William made the decision with clarity, not cruelty. His response was rooted in legal precedent, ethical governance, and the changing face of the monarchy in the 21st century. This wasn't personal, it was structural. The days of the Bank of Pa were over, and William was ensuring the doors were locked tight. Reeling from the rejection, Harry attempted to escalate the matter to his father, hoping that King Charles III might intervene with the mercy he had shown in the past. But the king's response was even more direct, signaling a unified front between the monarch and his heir. At 8:40 a.m., A private letter bearing the royal seal was dispatched from Sandringham, co-signed by both King Charles III and Princess Anne, who had jointly overseen the Sussex financial audit over the previous 6 weeks. The letter was 5 lines long. It read that there will be no duchy funds, no grace in favor extensions, and no further institutional correspondence regarding the Montecito property. It concluded with a devastating piece of advice. The king recommended liquidation at the earliest window. In those few sentences, the king formalized what the world had long suspected. Prince Harry was no longer part of the royal fold financially, logistically, or symbolically. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision born of anger. It had been building since the 8th of December 2025, when Prince William, tipped off by internal whispers about Harry's liquidity problems, ordered a confidential audit into the financial entanglements of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. William assigned Sir Alaric Worthington to lead the review, joined by Princess Anne, whose reputation for fiscal discipline and moral clarity made her a natural fit for the grim task. Over the next 3 weeks, the audit team uncovered a trail of unsustainable spending, misaligned charity pledges, and reputationally toxic financial maneuvers that shocked even the most cynical courtiers. One discovery in particular enraged the royal court and solidified the decision to cut Harry off. During the couple's royal wedding on the 19th of May 2018, watched by billions, Harry and Meghan had publicly pledged that all wedding gifts and proceeds, totaling over £2 million, would be redirected to the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, overseen by Princess Catherine and focused on education for vulnerable children. However, the audit revealed a discrepancy that Sir Alaric described as a misappropriation of trust. A large portion of those pledged funds was allegedly rerouted to a Delaware-based LLC named M&M Projects, which was used to fund the pre-production of Meghan's now-canceled Netflix series, Pearl. The palace had quietly backfilled the shortfall in 2021 to avoid a public scandal, but the betrayal stung. When King Charles was presented with the file on January 12th, his response was reportedly just 3 words. So it was true. The fallout from the rejection was immediate and far-reaching. When Prince Harry's final appeal arrived at Buckingham Palace via handwritten letter on January 13, there was no reply, only silence, then policy, then exile. The next 48 hours would bring not just foreclosure, but a total collapse of support from every corner of their lives, royal, financial, and Hollywood. If Prince William's rejection marked the end of royal support, what followed was the evaporation of Hollywood goodwill, beginning with one name, Tyler Perry. For nearly 5 years, Perry had been the Sussex's most powerful private ally. Back in March 2020, as Harry and Meghan fled Canada amid escalating security and media tensions, it was Perry who offered his $18 million Beverly Hills estate as temporary housing. He paid over $3 million in private security costs during their transition, provided transportation, legal introductions, and crisis PR support. However, that relationship collapsed on the 18th of January, 2026. On that day, Meghan Markle appeared on an unsanctioned lifestyle podcast hosted by a minor Hollywood influencer. In what was framed as an emotional reflection, Meghan made 3 explosive claims: that Tyler Perry had abandoned her in a time of crisis, that his role as godfather to Princess Lilibet had been weaponized for his own image, and that Perry used his connection to the royal family for prestige access. The accusation spread like wildfire across social media. Perry's response was immediate and lethal. Within 24 hours, his legal team had assembled financial logs, travel invoices, and correspondence, proving that all support provided had been at Meghan and Harry's request, not Perry's initiative. When Harry called him the next day, hoping for a short-term loan of $400,000 to stall the insurance-triggered foreclosure, he received a brutal reply. Perry reportedly told him, "I'm not the bank of the Godfather anymore. You defaulted on something more important than money. You defaulted on gratitude." The call lasted less than 3 minutes. There was no follow-up. Perry's exit was a signal to the industry that the Sussexes were no longer safe to support. By January 19, internal memos were circulating across the major talent agencies. Meetings were held, risk assessments were updated, and studio partnerships were reevaluated. At a private crisis session, WME's legal advisors formally warned Meghan that any further use of Perry's name publicly or in private pitches could result in defamation claims. That same day, Netflix issued its most severe blow yet. Under the Sussexes' multi-year content deal, reportedly valued at $100 million, 5 major projects had been proposed. But the track record was dismal. The Harry and Meghan docuseries was completed but over budget. Pearl was canceled mid-development. Heart of Invictus was delayed with no delivery schedule. A scripted royal drama was shelved without production. With only one fully delivered project and several violations of deliverables, the studio exercised a performance clause buried in the 2020 contract. On January 17, Harry and Meghan were served with a $20 million clawback notice. The legal brief classified the Sussexes' Netflix portfolio as non-compliant. One executive described the decision bluntly, stating that this wasn't a creative dispute, it was a contract failure. The fallout reached the Sussexes' own foundation, Archewell. By January 17, all grant disbursements had ceased since the previous October. The UK office in Mayfair was closed. The US team was reduced to 2 part-time contractors. Internal emails ceased circulation, and the foundation's website went without updates for over 40 days. Though not legally dissolved, Archewell entered administrative suspension, a pre-liquidation status often used by nonprofits to avoid litigation while preserving remaining cash flow. According to financial filings, the foundation now holds under $1.1 million in unrestricted cash, barely enough to cover operational costs through March. With the crown turned away, Perry out, Netflix hostile, and Archewell in stasis, the Sussexes were left in absolute isolation. As one former board member put it, they didn't just burn bridges, they set fire to the whole coastline. With Riven Rock on the verge of seizure and public scrutiny mounting, the couple took one final step, a desperate, secretive move to liquidate the only major asset they had left. By the early hours of January 20, the Montecito estate had become a financial time bomb with only hours left on the clock. Riven Rock, the 18,000 square foot mansion, had once symbolized their freedom. Now, stripped of insurance and entangled in contract breaches, it stood at the center of a quiet storm. Behind its manicured gates, a covert operation began. To avoid headlines, the Sussexes triggered Protocol Lapis, an elite, NDA-based pocket listing strategy used only by ultra-high net worth individuals seeking to offload sensitive properties without public disclosure. The listing was never published. There were no photos on Zillow, no open houses, only whispers among discreet brokers serving Gulf royalty and Silicon Valley billionaires. But the strategy backfired spectacularly. Over the span of just 48 hours, at least 4 vetted buyers reportedly withdrew after initial interest. Their reason was uniform and damning. One Beverly Hills realtor noted that, while the house is beautiful, buying it means inheriting the Sussex name, and right now, that name is radioactive. Behind closed doors, investors cited litigation risk, insurance complications due to the wildfire rating, and public image toxicity. One Gulf investor, after touring the estate via drone footage, summarized his conclusion in 6 words: a liability wrapped in landscape perfection. The house was unsellable not because of the bricks and mortar, but because of the ghosts living inside it. Inside Riven Rock, the unraveling was even more painful. On January 16, Harry and Meghan vacated the master wing of the mansion, relocating with their children to the guest house suite behind the pool to save on heating and staffing costs. By January 18, aerial drone footage captured the slow dismantling of what had once been a fortress. Tarp-covered furniture was seen being moved into trucks, the private gym was disassembled, Artwork and archival boxes were taped and labeled for storage. The theater room was stripped of tech equipment. According to former staff members laid off that week, the house had transformed into a ghost estate. They weren't moving to a new palace. They were shrinking into silence. HR logs leaked from Archewell's domestic operations division showed a dramatic downsizing. The private chef was let go. Security coverage was reduced to a single patrol shift daily. All perimeter motion sensors on the east side were deactivated to save money. Landscaping services dropped. Drone surveillance was grounded. Even delivery schedules slowed to a trickle. One neighbor told reporters it was like watching someone move out in slow motion. Every week, there were fewer people, fewer lights, and more curtains drawn. The most painful shift, however, came in the lives of Archie and Lilibet. For 2 years, both children had attended Kate School, one of the most elite preparatory institutions in California, with tuition approaching $50,000 a year. But on January 8, both children were quietly withdrawn. There was no farewell blog post, no official statement, only a brief comment from Meghan on a podcast about focusing on emotional wellness. But behind the words was a different truth. Records confirmed that the children were transferred to Laguna Blanca School, a smaller institution with significantly lower tuition. The move represented a savings of nearly $45,000 a year, but it came with trade-offs: less security, fewer donor protections, and less anonymity. A faculty member at the previous school whispered the truth. It wasn't about wellness, it was about money. The checks had simply stopped clearing. By January 19, the once grand estate had been effectively reduced to a vacation-sized footprint. The staff wing was closed and locked. The children's rooms were consolidated. Only one rotating cleaner was allowed access. Even friends and celebrities who once flocked to Riven Rock had gone quiet. Those who attended Archie's second birthday had not returned RSVPs since late 2025. Holiday cards were returned unopened. The transformation wasn't just financial, it was existential. They wanted the royal legacy without the royal discipline, and now they had neither. In London, the machinery of the monarchy moved on without them. Princess Anne appeared at an international forum in Geneva, delivering a speech about how institutions are defined by how they respond to pressure and principle. She made no mention of Harry, but the tone was unmistakable. There is no space for self-inflicted scandal in a system built on duty. Princess Catherine quietly declined an outreach proposal from Meghan's media team, reportedly stating that promises were made and not kept, and that children don't need campaigns, they need consistency. Perhaps the most potent message came from Prince William himself. At a Windsor Castle reception on January 21, a reporter asked if he had spoken to his brother. His reply was 3 sentences long. "We have moved forward. No anger, no grief, no debate, just closure." By the end of January 21, discussions within Parliament had evolved into active strategy regarding the revocation of the Sussex titles. A confidential memo circulated among the House of Lords outlined concerns that inherited privilege was being weaponized against the national image. The debate had officially moved beyond Buckingham Palace and was now a constitutional matter. One senior MP stated anonymously that this was no longer about freedom of speech. It was about the abuse of national identity for private leverage. Back in Montecito, on the rainy evening of January 21, a neighbor walking the ridge above the estate paused to look through binoculars. She spotted Prince Harry standing motionless on the balcony of the guest house, alone under a silver sheet of mist. There was no staff, no security detail, no bustle, just him. He wasn't pacing or on the phone. He was just standing there, staring at nothing. It was the final image of a prince once poised to redefine modern royalty. But the dream didn't collapse under scandal or eruption. It faded slowly and relentlessly from relevance, from protection, and finally from memory. By January 22, Archewell's final accounts were submitted for internal audit. No further announcements were made. No interviews were granted. Hollywood had gone quiet. Buckingham Palace stayed silent. The public was split, but increasingly indifferent. Not because they didn't care, but because the story had run its course. They built a brand around burning bridges, and eventually they ran out of wood. For the crown, this moment wasn't just personal, it was structural. The monarchy had spent years modernizing without compromise, tightening its fiscal oversight, and drawing moral boundaries in a world of brand building. This wasn't about punishment, it was about defending the institution from slow erosion. Every exception weakens the whole. In this new era, loyalty is measured and reciprocated. For Prince William, the decision to block the $36 million bailout wasn't just about denying funds. It was a declaration of his leadership model, firm, process-based, and unshaken by emotional appeals. Insiders now describe his directive of no bailout, no exceptions as a defining moment in his transition from heir to de facto head of the monarchy. He may not wear the crown yet, but his signature is already on its future. The titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex still technically exist, but with peerage discussions underway, they now resemble costumes left on a darkened stage. Riven Rock remains on the private market with no buyers confirmed. Archewell is suspended. Public trust is fractured. Harry and Meghan are still in Montecito, still without insurance, still facing a $20 million Netflix clawback, and still waiting for doors to open that no longer recognize their knock. This was not a royal feud. This was a slow, silent divorce from legacy, from structure, and from discipline. The Sussexes once believed they could rebrand royalty, make it palatable, profitable, and personal. Instead, they learned that fame is not fortune and autonomy is not immunity. In choosing freedom, they walked away from the system. In mismanaging it, they walked away from sustainability. And in defying its ethics, they walked into exile. As one former palace aide concluded, the crown doesn't exile anyone, but it does forget them thoroughly and forever.